Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Haas Team Podcast. My name is Brad Grew, and I'm coming at you live from Houston, Texas, USA. Today's episode is episode 003, What to Expect from Haas at the Bahrain Grand Prix. And in this episode, we're going to discuss what happened during the 3 practice sessions before Bahrain, and the Bahrain qualifying, and a crazy controversy regarding Sky F1, Romain Grosjean, Lando Norris, and Sebastian Vettel. And we'll also talk about the possible return of Ferrari to dominance, the Silver Arrows struggling in the desert heat, Renault is nowhere to be found, and McLaren continues to surprise. The midfield battle may not be all that it seemed to start the season. And because time is of the essence, there's only about 18 hours to the start of the race, let's just dive right in. To discuss the 3 free practice sessions. Both Haas drivers and their cars looked fine during the 3 practice sessions, and while they weren't lighting up the times, they were clearly dialing in the cars for the tricky and slippery Bahrain Grand Prix. As the race takes place in the desert and at night, free practice 1 and 3 offered very little insight to what we can expect during race conditions, as the track temperature soared upwards of 42 degrees Celsius, or over 107 degrees Fahrenheit, aka freedom units. At the end of free practice 3, which is close to race conditions, Romain Grosjean set P5, 1.249 seconds off the session leader Charles Leclerc of Ferrari. K-Mag finished FP3 in P13, nearly 2 seconds off the lead. However, Grosjean's car clearly showed pace was there. In qualifying, or Q1, all 20 cars are on the grid for 18 minutes to set their best lap, with the top 15 cars making it through to Q2. At the end of Q1, Grosjean and Magnussen both made it through easily, with K-Mag sitting P8 and Romain Grosjean sitting P10, with times of 1:29.532 and 1:29.688 respectively, by beating Grosjean's time by over 1/4 of a second. However, Q1 did not end without controversy. Approaching the beginning of his first flying lap, Romain Grosjean appeared to block McLaren's Lando Norris. But we'll discuss that more after we discuss all of the qualifying. The big news out of Q1 was Nico Hülkenberg of Renault failed to make it out of Q1. He actually finished P17. 2.168 seconds behind the leader, Charles Leclerc. That's a massive deal and great news for Haas, who are certain to be battling Renault throughout the year for best of the rest and 4th place in the Constructors. Moving on to Q2, which is 15 minutes for 15 cars, with the top 10 moving on to Q3, Kevin Magnussen set P4 after his first run, while Romain Grosjean set P9. And after their second laps, Kevin Magnussen set P5, while Romain Grosjean set P8. Kevin Magnussen's best lap was at 1:29.017, or 0.947 seconds off the lead, while Grosjean's best lap was a 1:29.249, leaving him an improved 0.232 seconds behind his teammates. Of the 5 drivers knocked out at the end of Q2, most surprising were Daniel Ricciardo of Renault finishing P11 and Pierre Gasly of Red Bull Racing struggling again for the second week in a row, finishing P13. So for the second week in a row, both Haas cars make it through to Q3, meaning they start within the points. And in the battle for the best of the rest, that is their most important goal each and every week, to finish in Q3 and to start in the points. So another job well done by the team this week, getting prepared for qualifying. And as the drivers headed into Q3, all that remained of the best of the rest with the Haas drivers is both McLaren drivers, Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris, sitting P7 and P10, and then Kimi Räikkönen sitting P9 for Alfa Romeo. So as they entered into Q3, there were 12 minutes for 10 cars to set their best lap times and to fight for pole position. And right off the bat, Kevin Magnussen absolutely nailed his lap and finished his first lap atop of the leaderboards at P1. He was quickly passed by Bottas and Hamilton of the Silver Arrows, but Magnussen's lap was easily the best of the rest for the day. That lap was 1:28.757, 0.947 seconds behind first-time pole setter Charles Leclerc of Ferrari. When all was said and done, Kevin Magnussen secured P6 from the starting position, so he will start on the 3rd row next to Max Verstappen, who beat him by just 0.005 seconds or 5 milliseconds. So with those numbers, you have to think that K-Mag has a chance at finishing P4 or maybe even reaching a podium if some issues happen with the Ferrari and Silver Arrows. And right here, we're going to play a short clip of race engineer Gary Gannon breaking the news to Kevin Magnussen that he had a fantastic qualifying and will start P6.
Yeah. Okay.
How are we doing?
Right now, you're still really good. Still P5. Just one more to go, I think.
Who got in front?
Right now, Leclerc, Vettel, Hamilton, Bottas. You're 5th. Okay, and Verstappen's going. So press in button, please. Press in button. So it's just Verstappen left. He's finishing his lap now. Verstappen got P5 by 0.005.
Anyway, good job, man.
It's P6, man. P6.
Yeah, good job, man.
Yeah, really great.
Mega car, really good.
Incredible quality, man.
Sorry about the last lap. I should have had that. Good job, guys.
Good job, man. You're P6, okay? And Sainz is 7th, Grosjean 8th, Raikkonen 9th, Norris 10th. Okay, really good.
Terrific job, man. Terrific job. Well done. Very well done.
Yeah, good job, man. Really happy.
We give you 2 tires in Q3 so you can go for it, you know. Okay, so watch for the white bridge lights. Yeah, we'll still be there. Okay, see you soon.
Well, I didn't need them.
Yeah, man.
So K-Mag there was a little frustrated with his second lap because the back end of his car got a little squirrely in a few spots, which cost him a better time. I think he feels he left some on the track, but that's just a tough track, especially with a second hot lap on those tires. So as you could hear, Gary Gannon was like, dude, you're P6, chill, it's all right. He's starting on the third row, which is the same as if he had finished P5 ahead of the Red Bull. Obviously, he's a competitor. He wants to beat the Red Bull, and it'd be great to say I beat a Red Bull in qualifying heads up, but K-Mag's great at starts, and so it's going to be interesting to see if him and Verstappen get into a little scrap at the start of the race. Okay, moving on to Grosjean's qualifying time from Q3. His best lap was a 129.015, 1.149 seconds from the leader, and again, about a quarter of a second behind teammate Kevin Magnussen, and 0.198 seconds behind Carlos Sainz in the McLaren, who split Kevin Magnussen and Romain Grosjean. And while Kevin Magnussen was extremely chatty with race engineer Gary Gannon after his Q3 session, Romain Grosjean was stoic and nearly silent when interacting with his race engineer Dominique Haynes.
Okay, dude, we are P8. P8. Good job, man. Good job. Box, Romain, box.
And as you could probably hear there, Grosjean didn't say a word to Dominique Haynes after hearing he was qualified for P8, but you could hear the garage in the background celebrating. And I can only think for two reasons that he may have been stoic and not celebrating, and that was he thought he could do better. Again, he was about a quarter of a second behind Magnussen for all 3 qualifying sessions, and I'm sure he felt that he probably did have an impending grid penalty coming up due to his blocking of Lando Norris in Q1. But either way, P6 and P8 is an extremely great day for the team, and is exactly what the team needs each and every week heading into each Grand Prix. Because as we discussed a couple of episodes ago, consistency is key in Formula One, and getting both drivers into qualifying 3 for the first 2 Grand Prix of the season is a great accomplishment for the team that hopefully they can build on. But of course, as we've mentioned a couple of times so far, there were some issues in qualifying 1 with Romain Grosjean blocking Lando Norris. And the FIA announced shortly after qualifying would receive a 3-position starting grid penalty and 1 point to his racing license. And this is key for 2 reasons. First, this pushes him out of the points. Now he's P11, starting P11, which puts him behind Daniel Ricciardo in the Renault. And 2, since he's already had some points put on his license last year, he is 4 points away from receiving a 1-race suspension. So basically, he's 1 major incident away from being sidelined for a race. And for those new to the sport, that doesn't mean that Haas doesn't get to race 2 cars. It just means that Grosjean can't be driving the number 8, which means that Pietro Fittipaldi, grandson of 2-time world champion Emerson, would fill the role for that race. He's Haas F1 Team's test driver for the 2019 season, and he's actually driven significant laps within the car during off-season testing. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. Hopefully Romain Grosjean will bounce back from this and recover and score some points tomorrow. So that brings us to the next topic of discussion. Was this Romain Grosjean's fault? And the short answer is no. But should he be penalized? The short answer to that is yes. And here's why. Each driver is responsible for what they do in their car. And that means that they should adhere to all rules and regulations of the FIA while they are in the car. Sometimes they are put in predicaments of no fault of their own where things still go wrong. And this is one of those situations for Romain Grosjean, which unfortunately he seems to find himself in quite often. Yes, at times in the past he has screwed up, but about half of the issues that he's had while in the Haas team, at least the last 2 seasons, have been through no fault of his own. And this is one of those times. I think there are 4 key bullet points or issues to talk about regarding why Romain Grosjean blocked Lando Norris. Number 1, Sebastian Vettel caused this problem. He had a right to pass Grosjean, but it wasn't the right thing to do. Sebastian Vettel caused this problem. For those that have not seen the replay, Grosjean was backing up and creating space between himself and the drivers in front of him, preparing for a hot lap. He was on the bubble. He needed to put in a good time to ensure that he would make it into Q2. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel sitting in the top 4 positions, and while also on an outlap, Sebastian Vettel passes Romain Grosjean, cutting off his preparation area that he had prepared for himself. So, Sebastian Vettel was greedy here. Did he have a right to pass Romain Grosjean, who was slowing down and backing up as he was coming around to the main straight, the final turn of the track? Yes. But should he have? No. And if some of you remember, this is exactly the thing that happened when Kevin Magnussen passed Marcus Alonso at qualifying in Monza. And guess who got penalized? Kevin Magnussen. Guess who didn't get penalized here? Sebastian Vettel. And that's my main issue with all of this. The rules are not the same for all the teams. Sebastian Vettel should also be penalized here, just like Kevin Magnussen was at Monza last year. The second issue is the lining up of these events were about 10 different things going on at once. And Grosjean was literally just in the wrong place at the wrong time. His track position, where he was slowing down, it was the final turn of the track, which is an extremely sharp turn to the right. There was traffic in front of him. Vettel passes him on his right. He just really had nowhere to go. Once he had made the decision to slow down and try to get some gap between himself and the drivers in front of him to get clean air for his flying lap, this all just happened. Number 3, there was nothing race engineer Dominic Haynes could be doing to keep Grosjean out of this bad position either. Because Dominic Haynes, just like Grosjean, were under the assumption that he was slowing down and about to turn onto the final stretch to begin his flying lap. But Vettel made him readjust and slow down further, and whenever Grosjean got to the final turn, he was in the middle of the turn, the racing line, which is a no-no. But in total, this entire thing happened in less than 3 seconds. I've timed it, I looked at the tape, I looked at the replay. There's just nothing that Dominic Haynes could do to know that Vettel was going to pass and screw up the timing of the entire situation. Finally, number 4, a 3-grid penalty is likely the right call. But again, there should also be a penalty for Vettel. Grosjean should have used his mirrors once Vettel screwed up his plans, and most importantly, he should have gotten out of the racing line. But you could also say he didn't have enough time to react to that because he was already preparing to take the racing line as he rounded that corner to begin his flying lap. And as many of you likely do, I listen to Haas radios every session. The race engineers tell Grosjean and Magnussen about traffic all the time. Q1 is always a cluster. There are up to 20 cars at any given time in just 18 minutes to set their best laps. I'm not defending Grosjean, but to act like massive blocks don't happen multiple times per session, especially in Q1, is disingenuous. As an example, in Australia, Verstappen blocked K-Mag in Q1, I believe it was turn 17, and Norris blocked Grosjean on that very same turn in Q2. It happens to everyone at some point. There's just too many cars on the track at that given time, and they all try to make their laps at the very last moment. Why am I saying all of this? Is for Haas fans not to blame Romain Grosjean and not to blame Dominic Haynes, the race engineer. There was really nothing they can do. To me, personally, the blame goes to Sebastian Vettel, just like it did to Kevin Magnussen last year whenever he did the exact same thing to Alonso. But hey, I'm just a guy talking to a microphone, but don't take my word for it. How about Lando Norris, the guy whose lap was actually screwed up? I think he just became my favorite non-Haas driver because he had the balls to say it like it is and to tell the world that Grosjean wasn't at fault. It was all Sebastian Vettel. In a post-qualifying quote, Norris said, "To be fair to him, he only had 3 seconds for his team to tell him I was behind if they didn't already. It would have been very hard for him if he didn't know to suddenly change his whole approach and give up this whole lap. From what he said, he didn't know I was behind him until I was pretty much about to crash into him. Vettel screwed him over, which is not a very nice thing to do in terms of us being racers. We try to respect each other." Norris then went on to compare Magnussen and Alonso, just like I have here at Monza. And so thank you, Lando Norris, for telling it like it is. Thank you for pretty much everyone who's a non-Ferrari fan telling it like it is, or even a non-Mercedes fan, or even a non-Red Bull fan. There are just different rules for those top 3 teams, and this is one of those scenarios. To me, the major grid penalty here should go to Vettel, and then Grosjean should also get a grid penalty, and that's because the speed at which this happened. And the FIA race stewards summed it up perfectly. The stewards accept that the driver of car 8 did not intentionally intend to impede. However, it is the driver's responsibility to be aware when traveling abnormally slow that faster cars may be approaching. The report cited a 136 km/h speed differential, which is nearly 85 miles an hour for my fellow Americans. But the controversy doesn't really stop there, because Sky Sports F1 commentator and ex-race car driver, Martin Brundle, made some nefarious comments regarding this situation. I made a reaction video that I posted to Reddit and YouTube because of this, and I was a little heated and a little angry with it, and as I look back, maybe I could have toned my language down, but whenever I think about it, no. And we'll talk about that after you hear this clip. This clip is going to be of Martin Brundle telling a bold-faced lie about Haas F1 Team, and then I provide the evidence to prove he is wrong. Hey, what's up, guys? This is Brad Grew of the Haas Team podcast. I had to just get this audio out really quickly after the qualifying in Bahrain because Martin Brundle is a lying bastard. I cannot believe that he had the gall to say something this reckless on the Sky F1 broadcast of the qualifying for the Bahrain Grand Prix.
Lando Norris giving it absolutely everything in his McLaren. He's been running fairly well so far this weekend, and he's on course to beat Alex Albon, but he's had to back right off because the Haas in the final corner there was right in his way.
And he nearly dropped it as well when he hit the throttle, did Grosjean. So that was quite clearly a block, and you're not allowed to block in qualifying.
So Romain Grosjean's backing off to make himself a little bit of space behind Sebastian Vettel, but he's backing off too much and he's on the racing line.
That could have been a very nasty accident. And I had a team manager telling me on the way flying over here that Haas do not tell their drivers about traffic. They leave them to look in the mirror. I find that amazing. Yeah. But they say they listen to the Haas radio, they listen into each other's radios, and they don't tell the drivers about impending cars coming up behind them, because that could easily be a penalty there for Grosjean.
Martin, don't be so stupid. It's easily verifiable. If only, Martin, you had the ability to verify these things yourself. If only they captured the audio from these sessions that you could hear the race engineers talk to the drivers. If only, you dolt. To prove what Martin Brundle said is a bold-faced lie, this first clip is race engineer Dominic Haynes talking to Romain Grosjean during Q1 of the Bahrain Grand Prix. This includes the incident where Norris nearly came into his rear end. And you can hear race engineer Dominic Haynes over the 2 flying laps and the laps in between talking to Romain Grosjean about traffic behind him.
So you are in sync with all the cars around you, all the cars around you are in sync. I think there's a chance the Mercedes at the head of the queue will slow down. So you can make a gap earlier, it may be beneficial. Watch for Norris behind now. Okay, Russell will be pushing behind,
We got completely fucked by the Ferrari on the outside.
We saw. Nobody coming, you're in sync with all cars around. Okay, remember we will have bought this lap, Watch for Sainz behind, 3.5 seconds, he is pushing. Once Sainz comes past, Perez, 6 seconds behind, pushing. Perez 3.5 behind, pushing. Perez 2 behind. Next car behind, Gasly, 4 seconds back, pushing. He is closely followed by Ricciardo. Gasly and Ricciardo will come through shortly. Okay, now clear behind. Box, Romain, box.
Okay, that audio was cut and spliced really quickly, but that was all just from Q1 with Romain Grosjean and Dominic Haynes, his race engineer. As you can hear, Dominic Haynes is clearly giving Romain Grosjean traffic updates on where he's at. What happened with the Lando Norris issue, Romain Grosjean was backing up and Sebastian Vettel pushed in front of him, cutting his backup space in half. And so, Grosjean slowed down, and as you can hear, he was pretty frustrated, dropping an F-bomb, talking about the Ferrari, and Dominic Haynes said, "We saw." And it just happened to be that Grosjean was in the racing line because he was prepared to make the turn to begin accelerating down the first straight, and it just happened. It's just bad luck for Grosjean again, that Vettel passed him, screwed up his spacing. Dominic Haynes didn't adjust to the fact that Grosjean was slowing down even further to know that Norris was going to be on his backside. You have to think that Dominic Haynes was thinking that Grosjean was about to turn down the main straight to begin his acceleration going into his flying lap. But let's not leave it there. Let's hear race engineer Gary Gannon talking to Kevin Magnussen on his one flying lap and his several outlaps.
Okay, one pushing car, Norris. Okay, Perez is leaving the pit lane behind. Norris is in turn 15 now, so Norris is like 15 behind. He'll be the one pushing car. So yeah, make a gap to that group now like you're doing, and then we can do a little bit more later. It's just like 10 cars ahead. Perez 7 behind outlap. Okay, Norris is 10 behind. Norris is 10 behind on a push. Okay, Norris is 6 behind on a push. Norris in turn 8 now on a push. So next car behind is Norris, 5 behind on a push. Norris 3.5. Norris 2 behind. Okay, that's it. Now you're in sync with everyone. It's about 10 cars starting a lap ahead. And 4 cars behind outlap. Clear behind. Kubica just finished the lap. I'm just going to find the next pushing car for you. Next pushing car is like 20 behind, so he has a ways to get to you. Albon 14 behind on a push, so he'll probably catch us before the end. Okay, so Albon's still 9 behind. Okay, well, box now, Kevin, box now. Albon's still 8 behind, he's on a push.
Box now.
Yep, and watch for the weighbridge lights. Watch the bridge lights.
And so that was Kevin Magnussen and race engineer Gary Gannon on the one flying lap in Q1 at the Bahrain Grand Prix that Kevin Magnussen did. As you can hear, they are constantly talking about other cars and where they are. For Romain Grosjean, he was in pace with most of the other cars around him for most of his qualifying one session, with the exception of Lando Norris coming up on his rear end whenever Sebastian Vettel had cut in front of him towards the beginning of his flying lap. I'm not excusing Romain Grosjean. He should have not been in the driving line, and he should be using his mirrors to know that they're coming up, and it was a very dangerous speed difference between he and Lando Norris. But at the same time, Martin Brundle has no right to be saying that Haas race engineers and the Haas team do not talk to their drivers about traffic around them. That's BS, Martin. You should know better. You're supposed to be a professional. You're supposed to work for Sky F1 Sports, not the Daily Mail or the Daily Mirror. You jackass. All right, and as you can see from that clip, I was a little heated. And I still, now that I look back, I'm usually someone that, like, whenever I get really heated, I'll, like, write an angry email and I'll wait till the next morning before I send it and reread it. But looking back on this, I think it's warranted. Because Martin Brundle said that on Sky F1 to tens of millions of F1 fans around the world. Tens of millions. And most of those fans are going to take him at his word. And that does irreparable damage to Haas F1 Team. A new team into Formula One who's still trying to get a footing, who's still trying to get sponsors, who's still trying to get fans. This does irreparable damage to them. Am I making a mountain out of a molehill? Maybe, but at the same time, I think if you ask the Haas F1 engineers, I think if you ask Gary Gannon and Dominic Haynes, if they find it as a big deal, I think they'll say yes. And as a fan, I'm going to side with them. Obviously, this is the Haas Team podcast. I'm going to be a little biased, but at the same time, for me in my life, truth means everything to me. That's why on the internet, I use my real name everywhere. And I have a unique real name. I'm the only Brad Grew in the world. My username on Reddit for 12 plus years, Brad Grew. Twitter, Brad Grew, etc., etc., etc. My username in video games is Brad Grew. So to me, truth above all else. What really pissed me off about this is such an easily verifiable information that he shared. So a team who doesn't like Haas, which we all know most midfield teams don't like Haas, Sky F1 talks about it literally every race, including today's qualifying session, complain that Haas doesn't have their race engineers tell their drivers where cars are on the track. As I said at the beginning of that, if only there was a quick way to verify that. Literally, whenever I wanted to make that last clip and debunk it, it took me less than 2 minutes to just click around through Romain Grosjean's Q1 session to find Dominic Haynes giving him car location updates. All it would have taken also was Martin Brundle just to ask literally anyone on the Haas F1 team, and they would immediately have said, "What are you smoking, Martin?" The booth in which he said that is less than 100 yards from where Haas's garage is. Come on, Martin. You didn't even do the bare minimum. You took the word of one team against the other. That'd be like trying to say, Ferrari saying Mercedes is cheating, and you don't go see if you can find corroborating evidence for that. You just come out and say, Mercedes is cheating. without any corroborating evidence. You don't tell the team who said it. You don't say anything. That's not how journalism works. I know you're not a journalist, but you're hired to give your insightful commentary, not rumor and conjecture and bullcrap. And I follow all of these members of the Haas F1 team that I can on Twitter and Instagram and wherever I can follow them, and I see the hard work they put in, and they don't deserve that. They don't deserve having their name thrown into this ineptitude of not letting people know where other traffic is. That's a safety issue. That's like saying, I heard from these nurses that this doctor doesn't scrub in before he goes into surgery, without actually, looking at videotape or asking the doctor himself. It's so stupid. It's so easily verifiable. Literally, it took me 2 minutes. And that included me loading the F1 TV page and clicking on qualifying one and clicking on Grosjean's name and then clicking around the video timeline to find Dominic Haynes telling Grosjean where people were. What the hell, Brundle? And I had people on the Formula One subreddit say, just Americans, they just complain about everything and want everything. It's like, I will never apologize for wanting honesty. We live in the world of fake news where Russia meddled in our elections and Facebook was compromised with fake information. Why would you ever? I make this podcast for a few thousand people. I would never say something that outlandish without corroborating it. And I'm a guy who records this in my underwear. I don't work for a major news organization who has researchers and fact checkers on staff. Come on. Do we really set the bar that low to say, oh, he just misspoke? No. To me, this is bigger than this misspeaking. And I'm sorry I've been on this bandwagon, but as someone who loves Formula One and wants it to catch on in the United States, I know that United States sports fans are extremely fickle. Many are fair weather. And if we had United States fans who are watching for the first time tuning in and they say something that outlandish about Haas, we may never have a chance at winning those fans over again. And to me, that's a big deal. I want this sport to succeed in my country. I've had the same sort of stuff happen with soccer. I'm a huge soccer fan. Soccer is another global sport that everyone in the world loves except the United States. I've had this exact same conversation, this exact same problem. So yes, I am more passionate about this maybe than I should be. At the end of the day, is it really that hard to ask someone before they go spout out some bullcrap before 10, 20, 30 million people to just, hey, take the 2 minutes it takes to fact check, to ask a question? Seriously, these nefarious comments are big because people's jobs rely on such information. Sponsorships and money can rely on that information. And again, most importantly, anyone who watches F1 with any real seriousness knows the hard work that every single one of those teams, from Ferrari to Williams, every one of those teams has an entire team of people breaking their backs to put on a great show for us. They travel the world, yes. It's a great job that a lot of us would fight for, yes. But they spend time away from family and loved ones and pets and everything else. The least we can do is give them the due respect they deserve. And fact-checking such a simple thing should at least be the bare minimum. And with that, yes, I will admit, we Americans are cocky sons of bitches. You come at us, you better come at us hard, and you better come at us with facts. And nothing pisses me off more than lies and deceit and misinformation. I hate the anti-vax movement. I hate the flat earth movement. To me, this is just as ridiculous because it's easily debunkable. Martin saying this is no more ridiculous to me than someone saying the earth is flat, because there are countless ways very easily that you can debunk it. Come on, Martin. All right, done. Promise. I do want to end this with saying I still respect Martin Brundle. He's actually one of my favorite commentators on it. Whenever he's doing roadside track and practicing in Q1 and getting these weird angles at these corners and stuff, I love that stuff. All I ask, pretty please, with sugar on top, do your freaking job. And yeah, I just quoted the wolf from Pulp Fiction. All right, enough of that. Let's talk about a couple other key things from the Bahrain Grand Prix qualifying. As I mentioned earlier, youngster Charles Leclerc secures his first ever pole position for Ferrari and the first ever pole position of his career. So congratulations to Charles. He's a fantastic driver with a bright future ahead of him. And Mercedes have their work cut out for them. They've been really struggling at Bahrain all through the practice sessions and qualifying. And they look to be, by the end of the race, at least 10 or 15 seconds behind Ferrari if they can maintain their current advantage. Obviously, during race conditions, anything can happen. And Gasly of Red Bull leaves a lot to be desired again. Again, he didn't even make it out of P2, which of course helps Haas and the best of the rest fight. That means that there's another position within the top 6 that one of the top 3 teams is not occupying. And Renault continue to struggle, and shockingly, Hülkenberg fails to make it out of Q1, which is great for Kevin Magnussen for trying to be the best of the rest and for the constructor standings. And Ricciardo failed to get out of Q2 and was scheduled to start P11, but will be starting P10 due to Grosjean's grid penalty. And McLaren continued to surprise. Again, Sainz split the Haas's during qualifying to sit P7, and Norris was P10, which is now P9 because of Grosjean's penalty. So it really does look like, at least for the early part of the season, that the midfield battle is going to be Haas, Renault, and McLaren. Wow. Shockingly. That's just a shocking turn of events. And so it's Lando Norris just seems to be a great driver who does some really good things. I think Sainz is the bigger threat to the points tomorrow, just because Norris, I think, is going to struggle within the race conditions. I think he does qualify great, but I think he's going to struggle in the race conditions, kind of like he did last week. And so hopefully you're listening to this podcast before the Bahrain Grand Prix. I'm sorry if you don't. There's only so much time between the end of qualifying and the publishing of a podcast, especially gathering all the information I had here and my blabbing on and on and on about Martin Brundle. But the Bahrain Grand Prix starts March 31st at 15:10 UTC time, which was 10:10 Central Standard Time in America, 11:10 Eastern, 8:10 Pacific, 9:10 Mountain. And in the 2018 Bahrain qualifying, Vettel and Kimi Räikkönen of Ferrari went 1-2, with Bottas and Hamilton finishing out the second row. And the podium from the 2018 Bahrain Grand Prix was Vettel, Bottas, and Hamilton. In 2018, Kevin Magnussen finished P5, while Romain Grosjean had some issues and finished P13, plus 1 lap. And so with Kevin Magnussen starting P6 and Romain Grosjean's penalized starting position of P11, Haas certainly has the ability to stretch their current lead against the best of the rest in the constructor standing. And Kevin Magnussen, of course, has the ability to stretch his lead in the best of the rest driver standing. Let's hope that everything goes great and the team works on all cylinders. To close out today's show, we're going to end with K-Mag's first outlap in Q3 and his blistering flying lap that nearly secured him P5. Denmark, this one's for your boy. He and race engineer Gary Gannon seem to be the dynamic duo. The hair versus the baldy. And I'd like you to pay close attention to the communication between Gary Gannon and the information he's sharing with Kevin Magnussen. I think that's going to be the key to this team's success this year, is everybody's on the same page and they're all doing their jobs. So I will see you next Wednesday. That's 4 days from now, 3 days after the race. That gives me time to digest all of the post-race news and sound bites and that kind of stuff. And so we're going to go back to a Wednesday to Wednesday schedule. So I'll see you Wednesday. Go Haas, go. And remember, kids, to wave to Nico Hulkenberg way back there in P17 at the start and tell him to
Sack my bolts, mate. Okay, remember to warm your brakes. That's Grosjean and Räikkönen ahead, Sainz behind. Okay, remember mode push, mode push. Okay, press N button. Okay, everyone's in sync behind, Sainz behind. That's a good lap. Very good lap. It's putting it quicker than Romain. Amazing what happened there in turn one. Okay, Bottas is P1 at 28.3, he's P2 now 28.3, and Hamilton 28.2, so you're just 0.5 off of them. Sainz behind 29.3, so 0.6 slower, he's only used scrub tyre. Still in sync with everyone. Okay, Kevin, so we'll box now. Box. Swatch the weighbridge lights.
Okay, box.
Go, Haas, go!